In the last section, we did an overview of the Passport.js library, and we got a sort of sense of how it might help us out with authentication with Google inside of our app. In this section, we're now going to continue by installing Passport and installing the Passport Google OAuth strategy. We'll then start to wire them up inside of our application, and we'll get a better sense of exactly how they work. So to start off, we're going to make sure that we install Passport into our project. Now we're going to install many different modules into our project over time. Every single time we do, we're always going to be using the command line, and we'll be making use of the npm package manager. So inside of my server directory, I'm going to run the command npm install --save passport. So that's our base Passport module. Remember, that's the generic set of helpers that makes Passport work well with Express. And then we're also going to install one strategy called Passport-Google-OAuth 20. Now, you see the 20 on here? You might be kind of scratching your head and saying, did he mean to say 20? And yes, I did. Make sure you put Passport-Google-OAuth 20, like so. So let's install this, hit enter, let it do its thing, and while that runs, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we're using this OAuth 20 thing really quickly, because you might be curious. If I change back over to the Passport documentation, which I still have open, I'm going to open up the strategies section, and then I'll search for Google. Now, when I do that, you're going to see on here Google OAuth authentication strategy over here. And so that kind of seems more relevant. And the name of that library is Passport Google OAuth. I encourage you to click on this thing, or just follow along. It really doesn't matter. And once you get here, you'll go to the GitHub page around this module. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll notice this first paragraph right here. This paragraph essentially says that the Passport Google OAuth module only works or only exists for backwards compatibility, and it actually recommends that you use either the Passport Google OAuth 1 or Passport Google OAuth 20 modules. And so that's why we're using OAuth 20. So we can click on this OAuth 20 link right here, and then we'll get some documentation around how to set up this strategy inside of our application. And so if you want to, you can read a little bit about usage down here, but believe me, we're going to go through all these the different steps in great detail. Now, just in case you're curious, why is it called OAuth 20? Well, 20 is short for 2.0 or OAuth 2.0. You can't put dots inside of npm module names, and so the library author decided to say OAuth 20 instead of just like OAuth 2 or something like that. Anyways, we've now got OAuth installed inside of our application, so let's change back over to our code editor and start to put this thing together. Now I'm going to tell you that for this very first authentication feature that we're going to work on, we're going to just go ahead and place all of our code directly into this index.js file so that we've got one single location where we can see all of this authentication logic. But as soon as we finish this feature, or maybe even when we get like halfway through it, we're going to very quickly come back and refactor this file into several separate files inside of our code base. Okay, so first feature, everything inside of index.js, and then we're going to very quickly refactor everything. Okay, so let's get to it. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the existing route handler that we had set up previously. So the app.get/. That was really just a test route, and we don't really need it anymore. So I'm just going to delete it altogether. Next, I'm going to require in two separate modules. Right underneath the require express statement, I'm going to first require in Passport. So I'll say require Passport, and I'll assign it to the variable of Passport. And then I'm going to also import or require in the strategy that we just installed as well. So I'll say const Google strategy is require Passport Google, make sure we get two S's there, Passport Google OAuth 20, like so. Now the Passport Google OAuth 20 module actually exports a couple different properties, and we only care about one very particular property, which is the strategy property. So we're going to add on .strategy to the end, like so. Okay, so we now have Passport, which remember gives Express the idea of how to handle authentication, and then the Google strategy, which we use to instruct Passport on exactly how to authenticate our users with Google OAuth. Okay, so now that we've got these two in here, we're going to take our Passport library and we're going to inform it or tell it that it should understand how to make use of the Google strategy inside of our application. So underneath our app declaration right here, we're going to say passport.use. That's a function, so we're going to put down our parentheses, and then we're going to put down new Google strategy and put a set of parentheses after that as well. Okay, so already we've got some kind of weird looking code right here. Let's start with what's going on inside of the function call. New Google strategy creates a new instance of the Google Passport strategy. So this essentially says, hey, application, I want to somehow be able to authenticate my users with Google. And inside of this function right here, inside of this constructor, we're going to pass in some configuration that tells this Google strategy how to authenticate users inside of our application. And we'll very shortly see exactly what options and what configuration we pass in here to configure it for our app. Before we get there, however, I want to talk about the other function call that we just put in of passport.use. So passport.use you can think of as kind of like a generic register, something to say, hey, Passport, you know how to handle authentication in general, but you don't really know how to authenticate users with a very specific service or a very specific provider. So you can think of passport.use as saying, Passport, I want you to be aware that there is a new strategy available. And here it is. Make use of it. Understand that users can use this to authenticate themselves inside of our application. Okay, so I think that's enough right now. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to add in some additional number of options to this Google strategy to customize exactly how it behaves inside of our application. So let's take a quick break and I'll see you in 1 second.